The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Yeah, looks like another Chamber of Commerce day, doesn't it? 73 degrees. Nice. Supposed to be that way rest of the week. A little rain on Friday, maybe. Next week, back to the 50s, but not too bad. And out of the woods for the snow. Coming up, I want to get to more on the free agency haul for the Commanders. They're bringing them in by the busload now. Mike Florio on yesterday with Dan Patrick. Interesting thoughts on Jerry Jones. We'll get to that later this hour. And Nick Saban was in front of a Senate committee yesterday talking about the state of college football. And what he says is the only thing they care about is money. That's it. No such thing as building young men. It's how much money can they put in their pockets. And we'll get to that coming up. I was just thinking about tonight. I like to watch Maryland basketball, not as much this year, but generally watch as many of the games as I can and often in their entirety. And they are playing tonight at a good time for me. I like to go to bed early, so it's not like a 9 o'clock, 9:30 tip-off in the Big Ten tournament. They're tipping at 6:30. Problem is they're playing on Peacock. And you might say, hey, old man, this is 2024. You got to have these services. Okay, I know it's heading in that direction. But in an era where we can watch just about anything on not free TV, but cable TV, I pay plenty for that. We don't have the ability to watch this game unless we have Peacock. You may have it. It may be a basic on your cable. I don't know how these things work now. I have Fios. I don't have it. And, I think about how things go round. What comes around goes round. And, I've told you many times when I was a kid that you could not watch Redskins home football games even though they were a sellout. It was not until 1973 that the NFL went to the blackout rule, which meant if your game was sold out 72 hours in advance, then you could televise home games. But prior to that, no matter how big the waiting list was, no matter how tough it was to get a ticket to the game, you couldn't watch it on local TV, including December 31st, 1972, when the Redskins played the Cowboys for the NFC Championship. You imagine that in your home market you couldn't watch a championship game because of the blackout rules? That's the way it was. Fortunately, my father had a good antenna on top of our house on Walnut Hill Road, and I was able to see it on Baltimore's Channel 2, a snowy version of it, but at least I got to see the game. And then that all changed when Robin Thicke went to court and got the ball rolling, and that's a long story. But by 1973, we could watch home games, and you kind of took it for granted, and it was television. After paying the cost of the set, the rest of it was free, except for, I guess, the electricity. But, cable TV didn't really become a stronghold until maybe the late 80s, mid-80s, something like that. So here we are. It's 2024, and I can't watch the game tonight. I'll be listening to Johnny Holiday and Chris Nockey do it on the radio, but because of the way things now work with the Big Ten pocketing a few extra bucks, selling off tournament games to Peacock, they've also sold regular season games as well, and I guess there's going to be more and more of this, and there's going to be more and more of this in the NFL. There's going to be another Peacock playoff game next year, and Amazon just paid, I think, $120 million to televise a playoff game next year. It's just the state of television, and it's got me confused and frustrated, and at some point, I guess I cut the cord and I get streaming. I don't expect to save any money, but at least I guess I'll be able to watch what I want to watch again, which I took for granted for a long time, wrote big checks, still write big checks to watch cable TV, but in cases like tonight, it's not doing me a lot of good. I could, I guess, go over to my daughter's house and watch the game, but, we're going to put my granddaughter to bed. They don't want me hanging around there and watching this game. So it's, it is what it is, but it's not, it's a money grab by the Big Ten. I understand it. It's available money, and they say to their consumers, too bad, go buy Peacock. But, how much more do you have to buy? You got to have everything. I mean, it's not even enough to have the movie channels. Like I have HBO and I have Showtime. Nope, got to have Netflix too. And that's another $21 a month. I mean, it's just, some point you just give up. You just throw up your hands in the air and go, yeah, that's the way it is. All right. When Adam Peters was introduced as the new GM of the Commanders, he was asked a question about assessing the current roster. And there was a pause big enough to drive a wagon train through, because I think he understood after looking at the roster, there's not a whole lot there. There's a few star players like Terry McLaurin and Allen and Payne in the middle, and maybe a couple of others here and there, Brian Robinson, but there's not much. And when asked, well, I guess it wasn't asked, but it was kind of leaked, that with the most cap money in the NFL, they have $90 million to spend, that they weren't going to go crazy in free agency. And the amount of money they've spent, they haven't gone crazy with it. But the number of players that they brought in, it's up to 10. And it just indicates how barren this roster is, because you're not bringing in, superstar names. There's really nobody in this group who blows your socks off. I mean, there's some names like Austin Eckler, who's been a really good running back, but he's coming up on 30 years old. He'll be 29 before the season starts. And he had a down year last year. You don't know how much he's got left. They've signed a kicker, Brandon McManus. That's good because I think Joey Sly missed too many extra points. So you got a veteran guy, and, if you get lucky and you bring in a guy in free agency in camp and he beats him out, that's fine. There's probably not a lot of guaranteed money there. And then yesterday, the big news of Marcus Mariota being brought in to be the quarterback, which would seem to indicate that's it for Sam Howell. I can't imagine, unless, there's some kind of crazy move here where Washington goes, yeah, we're just going to bridge the gap here. But the common sense is you got to take a quarterback. It's a quarterback-rich draft. You're picking number 2. You hopefully aren't going to be this high again for many, many years. And now you take advantage of that spot and you draft a quarterback. And it could be Jaden Daniels. It could even be Caleb Williams if somehow Chicago takes Daniels, or you can make a trade to move up. But I saw the signing yesterday of Mariota, and it was head-scratching because I had assumed, and maybe that was foolish thinking on my part, but I had assumed that Sam Howell would stay here for the 2 years that he's got left on his rookie deal. It's cheap. I think it's less than $1 million a year. And whoever they bring in as the rookie, hopefully Howell plays well enough that he keeps the rookie on the bench for about a year. That's the ideal situation. That's what they had with Patrick Mahomes, and that's, I think, what you'd want here ultimately, but it may be possible that they throw him in and he's got to play right away. Now with Mariota coming in, seems to be the end for Sam Howell. Can they get something for him? Maybe. Would you get as high as a 4? I don't know. Justin Fields is still being shopped by the Bears. They want a 2. Nobody's interested in that. So, the market is not really great out there for Sam Howell right now. So that was the big surprise from yesterday. Oh, they got a snapper by the name of Ott, OTT, which is good. So they won't be trading up as Ron Rivera did for Cameron Cheeseman. Oh, yeah. That was really ridiculous. And, they got some more help on the defensive line. But the big thing for me is it's 10 players. It's Adam Peters looking at the roster and going, oh, boy, we got holes here. And we're not going to fill them with superstars right away. But we got to upgrade this just a bit. So the number of players brought in is what is the real takeaway for me. As for what else happened around the league yesterday, the big news was the Derrick Henry signing by the Ravens up the road. And remember, last year at the trade deadline, there was discussion that they were going to deal for him. And in fact, there was some talk that was actually going to happen. And in retrospect, that might have been the difference in being able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, maybe being able to run the ball with a guy like Henry. But the deal wasn't made. Henry stayed in Tennessee, and the Ravens didn't have him and lost the game. Now with him there, that could be the missing piece. Tony and Mike on that yesterday on PTI.
Henry is 30 years old and coming off a season where he gained 1,100 yards, scored 12 touchdowns, and led the league with 280 carries. So what does this do for the Ravens?
Tony, it gives the Ravens another way to go after Kansas City, the way to go after the champs. That's what it does. It fortifies them. And people will get very specific, and they'll give you analytics and all that. You get a guy like Derrick Henry, it gives confidence to the entire room, particularly the people in that offensive huddle. Particularly, it would seem to me, if healthy, in November, December, January. You say, really? It's -9 in Kansas City? Fine. Let's go. All right? We got a quarterback with superior athletic skills. He may not be the superior quarterback, but his athletic skills. And we got a running back who may not go for 2,000 anymore, but can get us 150 in the cold, maybe 2 touchdowns, and kill you on 3rd and short, 4th and short, and in the red zone. Let's go. That's what the Baltimore Ravens is saying. It doesn't mean it'll work, but they're taking their shot with a heavyweight stud. I love what they've done here.
Yeah, so Derrick Henry is 30 years old. It's not old. It may be a little bit old for a running back. More importantly to me, his lifetime amount of carries in the NFL, 2,030 lifetime carries. He has led the NFL in carries 4 of the last 5 years. He is a workhorse. All right, we agree on that. But last year, Mike, and this is not analytics, it's simple numbers, he averaged 4.2 yards a carry. That was down from his career of 4.7. Way down from the 5.4 in 2020 when he had over 2,000 yards and he had 17 touchdowns. So the question I'm getting to is how much is left in the tank. And even with that, I think this is a huge move for Baltimore, right? Because they are a run-first team. They led the league last year, 157 yards running. They got a run-first offensive line. They know how to run. And, Mike, every carry that Derrick Henry has is one fewer carry that Lamar Jackson has to have, and it'll save his life.
Great point.
I mean, he has led the Ravens in rushing the last 5 years. You want him to play quarterback, not running back. So this is how, and I agree with you, this is how you catch and pass Kansas City. It's how you do it.
This is how you give it a shot, Tony. I'm going to call a name now, my sort of last sports hero as a teenager, and that's Walter Payton. You mentioned age. Walter Payton was like in his 12th year when the Bears finally won, when he won a Super Bowl. And there had been a dip, and there was all this concern, oh, wow, can he do that? He doesn't have to lead the league in carries or yards. He has to be effective. And here's where analytics don't matter. It's the confidence he gives, again, in that locker room, to that room, and to that huddle. That can't be measured with yards per carry. I'd like Derrick Henry on my side with Lamar Jackson if I'm going after Kansas City. I would.
I agree. We move now to Justin Fields, your boy, and quarterback musical chairs. The Vikings just signed Sam Darnold. We already knew the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins. The Steelers signed Russell Wilson. The Raiders signed Gardner Minshew. The landing spots for Fields are narrowing. Wilbon, what should the Bears do with Fields? Trade him for less than they hoped for? Keep him and not draft Caleb Williams? Or keep Fields and draft Williams anyway?
There's one thing that's a no. Keep both of them is a no. It's just a no. You don't need 2 guys, under 25. No. Now, you bide your time. You can be patient. I'm not saying Ryan Poles has made all the great moves or perfect moves in his time. He's had some couple of good ones and a couple of ones I don't like, the GM of the Bears. But, Tony, the panic out there really, to me, is a media story. It's an expert story. It is not a football story yet. There is time. There are trades made on draft day. There are trades made leading up to the draft. There are trades made in the summer. I don't want to see sort of Fields beyond minicamp if they're going to trade him. I'm fine with keeping Justin Fields and using that pick in other ways. Right. I am, as much as I love Caleb Williams. I'm not trying to get rid of Justin Fields. I don't see the need for that. So you bide your time. You get the best deal you can. Maybe it's not the deal you want, and maybe you cave a little bit later on. We're not at that point yet, no matter what the experts are saying on every network. You got some time to figure out to do with Justin Fields. Patience is a good thing here, I think, for the Bears and Ryan Poles.
Yeah, I don't want to get on your bad side by being an expert, but it feels a little bit to me like the Bears have sat on this a little bit too long. They may have thought there'd be a market that would develop for Fields, and maybe that market hasn't developed. Maybe nobody really wants Fields, or maybe the Bears have asked for too much. Now, Washington and New England need quarterbacks, but they got the 2 and 3 pick, so they're going to get a quarterback in the draft, and Washington just got Marcus Mariota, and New England just got Jacoby Brissett, which sounds like placeholders until a rookie is ready. The Giants picked up Drew Lock today. They may still want a quarterback. I think Denver probably needs a quarterback. It's possible Tennessee wants a quarterback. It's possible Seattle and the Rams want a younger guy to fill in when their older guys are done, Mike. But I would say that the news here for me is that it doesn't feel any longer like Justin Fields is guaranteed a starting spot somewhere. And that, I will concede to you, surprises me a little bit. I agree with you. You cannot keep him and draft Caleb Williams. We are old enough to remember what happened in Washington with Sonny Jurgensen and Billy Kilmer. The entire city took sides. It doesn't work in a locker room. It's not a good idea.
RG3 and Kirk
I agree
Cousins.
with you on that. Can't do that. Can't do it.
RG3 and Kirk Cousins. Tony, let me go back for a second. Nobody's guaranteed a starting spot, but 60 quarterbacks started in the NFL last year. I don't want to hear that Justin Fields is not one of the top 60. I don't want to hear that because that's garbage. 60 quarterbacks started. You know every team is going to start 2 quarterbacks at some point. So, you know, there's going to be a landing spot if they decide to trade him. Will they get exactly what they want? No, not necessarily. Let's see. There's a team in Washington that might want to trade for the 1 pick, to get the 1 kid on that short quarterback list from Washington, D.C., Caleb Williams. So there's a lot of things that could happen. I am not for throwing Justin Fields out the door. I'm not.
Okay, let me just set Mike and Tony straight. Mike's my age. Tony's 10 years older. And, yes, they are old enough to remember Sonny versus Billy. And then Wilbon threw in the comparison of RG3 and Kirk Cousins. These are 2 very, very different situations. Sonny Jurgensen was old, and he was beat up. He got hurt when Billy Kilmer came in, and it was a great quarterback controversy in D.C., and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and they were great friends, best friends, and they understood that they weren't really competing for the job. It was who was going to be physically able to play, and you had a coach in George Allen who Sonny didn't see eye to eye with, didn't like him at all. And Billy was a great leader, but he knew that he didn't have the talent that Sonny had. So it was really different. And, you know, as the story goes, when Joe Theismann came in 1974, which was Sonny's last year, Billy and Sonny made a pact that they didn't care which one played as long as Joe didn't. And they called him Theismann, which was his name before he changed it to Theismann to rhyme with Heisman when he was at Notre Dame. As for RG3 and Kirk Cousins, yeah, that was bad, and that was poorly handled by Robert Griffin III. You know, he got hurt in his rookie year, couldn't play in like the third to last game against Cleveland. He and his dad sat in the stands. They watched Kirk Cousins play and win the game, and they came up with the theory that Mike Shanahan was trying to sabotage his career, Griffin's career, by getting him hurt so he could play Kirk Cousins. I mean, that was just out of control nonsense. I don't think it would get to that in Chicago, and I think it's quite possible that, and Wilbon suggests this too, that they go ahead and they draft Caleb Williams number 1, and Justin Fields stays on the roster, and they wait, and they may even wait into the season. I don't think it would be a raging quarterback controversy, and I think that it would be wise, even if they take Caleb Williams number one, if he's not significantly better than Justin Fields, let Fields start the season. Let him go. And if they keep winning, keep him in there and don't trade him. But if, you know, you're around 500 or so at the trade deadline and you got promise being shown by Williams, then you trade Justin Fields and you get a lot more than you could right now. I mean, they were hoping to get a number 2 for him. They're probably going to settle at some point. Maybe it's during the season for a 3, maybe a 4. But I don't think they're going to get that now because there are still quarterbacks out there on the market, and I think it'll be a while before they'll be able to get any kind of value for Justin Fields. It's certainly not there now. And as you know, the Cowboys so far have not signed any free agents because they're hamstrung by the Dak Prescott contract, which has like a $50 million cap hit for the upcoming season. Now, Jerry Jones recently said, well, we're all in. We're all in. Well, you can't really be all in if you can't make some roster improvements. Plus, you're going to lose, a few guys here and there because of free agency and just guys you're going to cut because they're not as good anymore or whatever. And they haven't done anything so far. So Florio has an interesting theory on what's going on with Jerry Jones as he runs the Cowboys.
The more I hear from Jerry Jones, the more I think that this nonsense about I want to win the Super Bowl and you'd be stunned at the size of the check I'd write if I knew that it would deliver a Super Bowl. I think that that's just a lot of baloney. And he's just trying to keep the Cowboys as the most talked about team, America's team. I mean, think about it. The fact that the Cowboys are still the best draw in the NFL after not going to an NFC Championship game for 30 years, that's more impressive than winning one Super Bowl. He's kept that team relevant, and we're talking about him now because he's always got something that stirs it up and makes people think that they're all in, when who the hell knows what all in is, and they're not going to be all in the NFC Championship game again this year.
Yeah, so you think he's satisfied with being relevant,
Yes.
not necessarily being elite?
All these teams say, we want to win the Super Bowl every year. We want to win the Super Bowl every year. Well, if that's truly the way you measure success, you're pissed off a lot. For Jerry Jones, you're pissed off for 3 full decades. Meanwhile, he's got a giant yacht. He's worth billions. And the Cowboys are the most valuable property in the entire NFL, even though they haven't played for the right to go to the Super Bowl since 1995. He, I think, secretly values what the Cowboys are more than this. And your competitive nature takes over at some point. Yeah, you'd like to win a Super Bowl, but he's winning a much bigger game. And he's got the biggest and best team in the NFL, despite the lack of accomplishments for 30 years.
Well, I think Florio's right to some extent, but he does want to win. Jerry wants to win a Super Bowl. He just wants to do it his way. And if you look at the entire history of sports, and I'm searching my brain for other examples besides George Steinbrenner, really can't think of them, where the owner is out in front, the owner is the lightning rod, and the owner wins. And George had the advantage of no salary cap. So he was able to, and he would sign guys who wouldn't work out, and he'd just eat the money and move on. And he could because he had the biggest television contract in baseball, and being in the number one market, had the most money to spend, and a franchise that he bought for $10 million. CBS had paid $13 million for it, and Steinbrenner bought it in 1973, I believe, for $10 million. And now it's, the most valuable franchise in baseball, probably worth north of $7 or $8 billion. Who knows, maybe 10, 12, whatever. And Jerry, same thing, paid $189 million for the Cowboys, and now they're the most valuable franchise in sports, I believe, and probably he could get north of $10 billion for them. But he also, I think there's a part of him that wants to, I don't want to say get revenge, but wants to kind of rewrite the narrative on him as he won his first 3 Super Bowls because of Jimmy Johnson. He's made peace with Jimmy. They clearly were at odds for a long time. He finally put Jimmy in the Ring of Honor at the end of last season. So they're back in, and they're, I guess, like old timers. Kind of like what happened here between John Thompson and Lefty Driesell late in their lives. They were bitter rivals, and they got to be friends at the end. And I don't think, you could consider Jerry and Jimmy bitter rivals, but the way things ended with the Cowboys, there was some bad blood there. And I think that that Jerry truly wants to win a Super Bowl. He just wants to be seen as the guy who did it. And in the meantime, Florio is 100% right that he's benefiting from the fact that they're always in the news. People are always talking about them, and he's always being talked about. He loves that. He loves the attention, and he's great with reporters. You never hear a reporter rip him personally. They'll rip him for the job that he's doing, but he calls everybody back. He's cooperative. He's a great businessman, and he got his start, as you know, in his father's grocery business. He would dance out in front of the store to drum up business. He knows customer relations. The friendship, supposed friendship, who knows, but the way that certainly Dan Snyder wanted to portray it as a friendship, they couldn't have been different, I mean, Jerry understands customer service. Snyder treated his customers like crap. It was like, they were doing you a favor by letting you come see the games in that crappy stadium. So, it's amazing what Jerry has done over that period of time. And in his 80s, he's still got some juice and still has people talking about him every single day. Not for the best of reasons. Like he's involved in a paternity situation now where he has to take a test. But he's always in the news, and the Cowboys continue to print money and are, I guess, the most successful franchise in a league where winning is valued. It's great if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. But if both teams were on the market right now, the Cowboys would sell for more money. Bigger market, understand that. But the Chiefs with 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, you kidding me? Coming up, what Tiki Barber said about his dust-up with Saquon Barkley, plus Zach Ertz, who's signed with Washington. He was the first of the free agent signings last week. Held a little news conference yesterday. We'll go through some of his comments as well. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Well, the Commanders have been spending a lot, and I mean a lot in volume of players, not in volume of money, because they had $90 million to spend, and the way Sports Track has it, they haven't spent all that much of it, even though they brought in 10 players, and the deals all become official at noon today. The headliner yesterday was Marcus Mariota, which I don't know if that's a complete surprise. Jacoby Brissett, maybe they wanted to re-sign him. He went back to New England. He was very much liked there, and with their complete uncertainty at quarterback, I mean, it's almost certain that they will draft one at number 3, but they might stick with Brissett for a little while. He's been there before, and he may actually start the season no matter who they draft at number 3, if in fact they draft a quarterback. But Marcus Mariota coming here seems to spell the end of Sam Howell. I can't imagine that Sam Howell is going to be a third-string quarterback as he was 2 years ago after starting every single game this past season. And if there's demand for him, maybe. I don't know. What would they get for him? They drafted him in the 5th round. Would they get a 4th for him? Yeah, probably about that, if some team is willing to do that. But there's still, quarterbacks out there. Justin Fields is still in Chicago, and the Bears are reportedly asking for a number 2 pick, a second-round pick, and there's not anybody biting on that because quarterbacks are still there to be had, and you don't even know what's going to happen with Zach Wilson if somebody wants to take a flyer on a guy who was the number 2 pick of the draft just a couple of years ago. So there's a lot that can happen between now and then. I also saw that Jimmy Garoppolo is about to be released, so he's going to hit the market too. And the Mariota thing, if you watch the Netflix series Quarterback, he was featured prominently, 3 quarterbacks with Cousins and Mahomes and Mariota, all different stages of their careers. And you remember he lost his job at the end of his year in Atlanta, and they gave it to Desmond Ridder. They wanted to look at him for the last few games, and he just checked out. Now, allegedly, he had a knee that needed surgery and decided to have it, but didn't even come back around the team. Spends another year playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, didn't play that much behind Jalen Hurts last year, and he said recently, maybe he said this yesterday, he said, I'm at a point in my career where I've experienced everything. I've been the guy, I've been the scout team guy, I've been released, so through it all, those different scenarios and situations, I've gathered a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. I'm at a point in my career where I just want to enjoy the game. I want to have fun doing it. So he's not here to compete for the starting job, it sounds like. And he knows the situation. He wouldn't have signed here if it was uncertain. They're almost certainly going to draft a quarterback. And I don't think, maybe it's possible, could it be possible that they say, oh, yeah, you're going to have to compete with Sam Howell for the number 2 job? I think with the amount of money that they're spending, because Howell is making less than $1 million or about $1 million, and you brought Mariota in for $6 million with incentives that could take it to 10. So I don't think that's going to happen. Some other moves that they made yesterday, they brought in a long snapper, which wouldn't seem like a big deal. There's a lot of teams in the NFL who have long snappers that play with the same team for 10, 12, 15 years, and nobody knows who the hell they are because they don't have a bad snap. But they had Cameron Cheeseman here, and things were okay for a while, And then he got the yips this past year, and he almost got Tressway killed in a game late in the season, a meaningless game, because he couldn't get the ball back to him, and he was dribbling it back on extra points and field goals and things. So, yeah, you had to dump a guy who they traded up in the 5th round to get. Traded up to get Cameron Cheeseman, cut him loose. They brought in a guy who's a free agent, Ott, used to play for Seattle, familiar with the new special teams coach there, Larry Izzo, who's here now after being his coach when he was with Seattle. And last year he was with the Ravens. So he makes the short trip from Baltimore to Washington to be the long snapper. They get another defensive end, Cleveland Ferrell, who was once a high draft pick by the Raiders, number 4 overall, drafted 4th in 2019, had a pretty good rookie season, and then started all 17 games for San Francisco last year. So he's coming here. That's a little bit of help. They also picked up a safety, Panther safety Jeremy Chin, 1-year deal, maximum value roughly $5.2 million. Looks like Cameron Curl is going to go to Seattle. So that. It looks like he is not going to be coming back, and they still need some help there. But, you talk about 10 players coming here. That tells you that the roster that Adam Peters looked at was, like we got to put some Band-Aids on this right now. They haven't spent a lot of money, no big blockbuster deals, but just players who they can plug in, offensive linemen like Nick Allegretti. He's been a backup with Kansas City. He really hasn't been a starter, but he's been a part of 2 Super Bowl teams, and they're going to be able to use him for depth. Tyler Biadasz, who's from the Cowboys, be the veteran center that they're going to need for a rookie quarterback. And I guess, from all the chatter I'm hearing from the people who covered the team, the biggest signing that they made was linebacker Frankie Louvu, who comes from Carolina. Carolina was terrible. It's hard to tell, just from a glance how good he was. But the thinking is that this guy is really going to blossom here. So that's what they did. Nothing that'll really, blow you away, including a guy who may or may not wind up in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if it's that good. But Zach Ertz was not just a Pro Bowler 3 straight years. He was All-Pro 3 straight years from 2017 to 2019. He missed only 3 games during that 3-year stretch, caught 74 passes in 17, 116 in 2018, and 88 in 2019. He only played in 11 games in 2020, had 36 catches. And then the following year, he played 17, but it was with 2 different teams. He was traded at the deadline from Philadelphia to Arizona, and he had 74 catches that year. And then the following year, he played in only 10 games and had 47 catches. And, you talk about the relationship that he has with Cliff Kingsbury. Realize he only played a year and a half with Kingsbury. And between the 2 years, what did he play? Half of 2021. Only played, 18 games with him, a little more than a season with him. But this was Ertz yesterday on why he chose to come to Washington.
Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and Cliff Kingsbury are pretty much the main reasons that I'm here. These are guys that I truly believe are going to build long-term success at this place, and it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Obviously, I love playing for Cliff in Arizona. He's a guy that was one of the best offensive minds that I have been around up to date, and I still feel that way. So I'm extremely excited to get back into his offense and also just help this team, help this organization kind of build success from the ground up.
Ground up. You don't often hear that, that the teams don't like to admit that you have to build from the ground up. But that free agent haul of 10 players also is indicative of that, of just how many holes that they have to fill. Now, this kind of, you take this with a grain of salt. Zach Ertz was cut last year by Arizona. He sat for a long time. I thought Baltimore might bring him in. They had an injury at Mark Andrews, tight end. They might bring him. No, that didn't happen. Finally, just going into the championship game, the NFC championship game, he wasn't active for it, but Detroit had signed him during that week. And the plan was for him to play in the Super Bowl. But, he was on the street for like 2 months, 2.5 months. Nobody signed him. Yet he says this about this offseason.
Obviously, there were a bunch of teams that were interested in signing me, not only once free agency started, but even going into last season when everything happened in Arizona. But I didn't want to jump into anything just to jump into something. I wanted to evaluate all the options and make the right decision, not only for myself, but for my family as well. Obviously, it's not just a decision for Julie and I anymore. We have an 18-month-old boy at home. And so the decisions are much bigger than myself. But at the same time, the reason I'm here is I believe in this place. I believe in the ownership. I believe in the head coach. I believe in the GM. I believe in the OC. I look at the skill group, and I think this is a group that can be extremely talented, a group that could be extremely hard to defend. And obviously, I can give 1,000 different cliches about why I think we're going to be good. But at the end of the day, it comes down to putting work in on the field and on the practice field and getting better, because no player should be where they are today by the time the season starts, or by the time when, as a team, as a player, you always want to be peaking at the right time and improving constantly. And I'm not a guy that is going to sit up here and say I'm a finished player. There's always something I can learn. There's always something I can get better at. So I'm excited about doing that.
Julie is Julie Ertz. His wife's on the U.S. women's national soccer team. I believe she's still playing. And would she play here for the women's soccer team? I don't know. That'd be something to keep an eye on. But as far as opportunities for a guy who has not played much in the last couple of years, he had 7 games last season, 27 catches, just 10 games the year before. So 17 games over 2 years. And he is going to be 34 years old in November. And, you know, these days seems like tight ends catch more touchdown passes. It just seems that way. Now, he's productive, and, you know, it wasn't that long ago where he was having a 100-catch season. But in 12 years in the NFL, he's got 46 touchdowns. The most he's ever had in one season is 8. He's had a good career. You know, you might think that'd be enough, hang it up, but he's apparently got more ground he wants to cover, and says he has an actual chip on his shoulder.
I've never felt like, hey, I've made it. We won a Super Bowl. I didn't feel like we made it. I have the record for catches in a season by tight end. I didn't feel like I made it. I feel like if I've ever lost that chip, I feel like I should have retired at that point, or left, or done something else with my job status. Because I feel like I have a lot to prove in this league. I still feel like I can improve as a player, and I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that the DMV is getting my best this year, and it's something I'm extremely excited about.
I hope he stays healthy. 34 years old, and injuries the last couple of years, and getting older, and not exactly a touchdown machine. But we'll see. We'll see what else they do. I'm sure they're going to draft a tight end. They got a lot of picks, and it looks like what Kingsbury does, there's a lot of tight end action. And, you know, look at the Kansas City Chiefs and how much how much they rely on the tight end. And so I think that they'll have some others in here. But that was the first of the free agent signings, was Zach Ertz. Meantime, you got good old-fashioned radio dust-up. And Tiki Barber, who played 10 years in the NFL, thought he could walk into NBC and become a superstar. And as the story goes, he felt entitled from the beginning. He didn't put the work in, and they fired him. They got rid of him. And he came crawling back to do sports radio at WFAN in New York. That was after a failed comeback attempt. That was after NBC said, get the hell out. And he did not make it back in the NFL. I don't even know if he got a tryout, but he got a lot of publicity for getting himself back in shape. Hadn't played in, 4 or 5 years. And so now he's a sports radio guy, does an afternoon show on WFAN. And yesterday he was on the Dan Patrick Show to explain the comments that he made that got Barkley incensed enough to just rip in to Tiki Barber. And this is what Barber said on his radio show on FAN, followed by Dan Patrick's questioning of what actually went down.
The fact that Saquon would even contemplate going to play for that team in Philadelphia is insulting to his Giant history and legacy. Saquon very may well not be a New York Giant. I know that Joe Shane is having conversations, but it just doesn't feel like it's going to work out. Go to Baltimore. Go to Houston. Go to LA Chargers. Do not go to the Philadelphia Eagles, because if you do, that appreciation and respect and reverence that we all have for you, Saquon, will be lost.
Let's bring in Tiki Barber. This is just good local radio content. Saquon Barkley didn't take it that way. Good morning, Tiki. How would you sum up this back and forth?
No, I don't think it's really a back and forth, Dan. As you know, being in the industry as long as you have been, our job is to entertain, to inform, and sometimes get a little bit visceral because that's how the fan is. And they want to express themselves, but they don't often get a chance to call in and talk about it. So we do it for them. And look, that's how Giant fans were feeling about Saquon Barkley. I just happened to be the messenger that got the shrapnel from Saquon. We decided to respond to the one-day story.
Are you going to respond to his response where he says that you've been a hater since he got to New York? All the dead to me talk, don't smile in my face when you see me.
I smile at everybody, Dan. You know that. You've met me a couple of times. It's part of the job. It's part of the, I think, reaction that comes from athletes who think the media is always against them. But the reality is Giant fans loved Saquon Barkley. It just felt like it wasn't going to work out. Now we have to worry about him running all over us for the next 3 or 4 years down in Philadelphia. And that pains us. It really does. And it pains me. So, I mean, I still like Saquon. I wish him nothing but luck. But he also has to realize that my job for the last 17 years has not been to be in a locker room. It has been to be a voice of the fan, on the fan.
Okay, but if he had gone to the Texans or Baltimore, how would you have reacted?
We would have said, good luck. You know, have a great time. C.J. Stroud's an amazing quarterback. D'Amico Ryans is a fantastic young head coach. You're going to have a ton of success, and it's far enough away from us where we're not going to feel it. I think part of the issue here, Dave, is we're going to feel this. And when they have success, when him and Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts start wreaking havoc on the NFC East again, we're going to see it. We're going to feel it. It's going to be right there. And it's going to bring us back to this moment where he chose the Eagles, despite not being able to get a deal done with the New York Giants. It's not his fault. Obviously, it seems like Joe Shane's priorities were elsewhere and restructuring this team, obviously starting with the offensive line and the defensive line, which I think is core to any good organization. But it's just close. It's down the turnpike, right? We're going to see him, and we're going to see him twice a year.
I think the Giants made a smart move. I think Saquon made a smart move. If I put you in his position, that you know this team is going to be rebuilding, and you have this opportunity, even though it's your bitter rival, let's play hypothetical running back here, Tiki.
You know this. I played 10 years. I was a Giant for life. There is no way I was ever going
Let's
to
say they didn't
Eagles.
want you. Let's say they wanted to move on. They didn't want to pay you what you thought you were worth. And
they didn't want to pay me what I was worth. Saquon's guaranteed money, the 2-year guarantee is more than I made. Didn't want to pay me. And so I know this. I didn't have any leverage. I didn't want any leverage because they knew I wanted to stay. They knew I wanted to be in New York. They knew the relationship that I had with the organization, both the Maras and the Tishes and the fan base, whether they loved me or hated me at certain points in my career. I was never going anywhere. I knew how important it was to me to be a Giant for life. And I think Saquon did as well until the money wasn't there. And he went anywhere except the one place we didn't need him to go. The one place.
Okay, but how much loyalty should players have?
I mean, it's changed so much because, you know this, Dan, the money gap has gotten enormous, right? The amount of resources that are now doled out to players, money has to be a primary concern because loyalty doesn't exist. I mean, Saquon said this earlier this year in talking about the franchise tag. Loyalty isn't as important as it used to be, but I would posit, Dan, that rivalry has to mean something, right? The core of why a sport matters. It's not just going out and entertaining and being hunky-dory with one another when it's over. It has to mean something more than that. At least that's what the fan thinks. And so I think sometimes there is a disconnect between the player and the fan. Part of that's obviously because they're on the field and the fan is not, but it has to mean something. Rivalry has to be important. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing it for?
What would you say if you see Saquon Barkley, when you see Saquon Barkley?
I'm sure I will see him. I'll say good luck and congrats. I'm happy for his career. It's just a series of unfortunate events that allowed his Giant career not to work out that everyone had envisioned, including Dave Gettleman when he drafted him second overall.
My worry is that he might run into your brother Rondé and then punch him, thinking that he was punching you. So that's
Ronnie's a Hall of Famer now. All right, you can't punch a Hall of Famer.
He's a made man in the mafia. You can't punch a Hall of Famer.
That's exactly right.
That's Tiki Barber with Dan Patrick yesterday. I'm just thinking about Donovan McNabb being traded here in 2010 from Philadelphia, and I guess at that point Andy Reid realized he was done, and Washington's so willing to bring him in, and nobody. Washington at that point was so beaten down. That was 11, 12 years into Dan Snyder ownership. And so nobody said, how can you bring a hated Philadelphia Eagle here? The rivalry stuff had so dried up. Not all Snyder either, because, they had 4 or 5 years under Cook after they won their last Super Bowl where things kind of, fell apart, the Norv years. So, it's just interesting that in New York there's this real anger that Saquon Barkley is going to the enemy, whereas, when we had Donovan McNabb come to town, and I don't even think Philadelphia looked at it like, oh, God, look at that. He's going to Washington. That's just terrible. Washington wasn't even thought of really as a rival, whereas the Eagles and the Giants, I guess, are. I mean, the Eagles have had the upper hand last couple of years, but the Giants, they had their Super Bowl runs with Eli Manning and were beating Philadelphia at that point. So it's just how these things are viewed, and I don't think Tiki Barber realized he was uncorking a grenade when he said those things about Saquon Barkley. But with Barkley responding the way he did, like you're dead to me, that's and don't ever look at me and all that stuff. That was kind of surprising. And Tiki's right. You are supposed to, in the sports radio business, entertain one and say compelling things that people, would react to. And that's exactly what happened there. So guy did his job. Coming up, Nick Saban testifying before a Senate committee yesterday on the state of college football. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today. I don't know what happened to the sunshine outside our window. It was looking really good before. Anyways, partly sunny, no chance of rain today, and nice weather for a while, which is good. So yesterday, Senator Ted Cruz wasn't a full hearing. It was more like a committee meeting on the state of college athletics. He's trying to get legislation passed that would provide antitrust protection and regulations to college athletics by the end of the year. He seems less optimistic now than he was several months ago when he said that it was going to be a 60-40 chance of getting it through before the election. He said yesterday the clock is running, and he says if it's not too late to get it done, but we're getting close to it being too late to get it done. I think there are elements there of getting by a bipartisan agreement. We just have not been able to get everything on the table to sign off. So he had Nick Saban there to talk to the committee. And as you know, Nick Saban just retired, and he retired saying, no, it wasn't NIL that drove me out. We've had to adjust before, and we would have adjusted to that. I just felt like it was time. Well, as the weeks have gone by since his retirement, he spills more and more out, and he's now, full out like, yeah, it's a mess right now, and it's only the players that get the most money where they go, and that's all they care about. So this was some of the testimony yesterday that he gave to senators about how he feels college football is going at the moment.
That's my major concern, the combination of pay for play, free agency, and how that impacts development. And I can attest that I've had 2 NFL coaches tell me, and this is a football deal because they're concerned about the football part, that the players come to them less developed, with more entitlements and less resiliency to overcome adversity. And these are concerns that they have even in their football development. Well, if that's true in their football development, is that true in other parts of their development, whether it's academics or personal development? And each time you transfer, you minimize your chances of graduating by probably about 20%. Now we have guys transferring 2 or 3 times. So some of the goals and objectives of what we've worked so hard for the last 20 years to improve graduation rate, to improve health care for players, to have mental health care for players, all the things that we work so hard to improve on, we're going to start seeing slide in the wrong direction because we've created an environment that really does not promote personal development or that is going to create success for their future.
You know, one question I have to ask. You just retired from a amazingly and historically significant coaching career. How much did the current chaos and state of the law contribute to your decision to retire now?
Well, all the things that I believed in for all these years, 50 years of coaching, no longer exist in college athletics. So it's always was about developing players. It was always about helping people be more successful in life. My wife even said to me, we'd have all the recruits over on Sunday with their parents for breakfast, and she would always meet with the mothers and talk about how she was going to help and impact their sons and how they would be well taken care of. And she came to me, you know, like right before I retired and said, why are we doing this? And I said, what do you mean? She said, all they care about is how much you're going to pay them. They don't care about how you're going to develop them, which is all what we've always done. So why are we doing this? So, you know, to me, that was sort of a red alert that we really are creating a circumstance here that is not beneficial to the development of young people, which is why I always did what I did. My dad did it. I did it. And that's the reason that I always like college athletics more than the NFL, is because you had the opportunity to develop young people. So, and I want their quality of life to be good. I think, as I said before, name, image, and likeness is a great opportunity for them to create a brand for themselves. I'm not against that at all. But to come up with some kind of a system that still can help the development of young people, I think is paramount to the future of college athletics.
Well, college athletics as they are now, and there has been a lot of pushback from what Saban said yesterday on social media and other places where people say, well, you know, you made $11 million a year in your last gig at Alabama. You have Mercedes dealerships. You're wealthy beyond belief, and you're going to continue to make a lot of money doing television. Why is this an issue? Now, he continues to say it's not a problem. In fact, he's in favor of players getting paid. But there just isn't a system now which makes any sense. I mean, he is 100% right that the players are just going where the money is, and that's all they care about. And when you're 18 years old, how can you have that kind of perspective where you know how much this is going to mean to your life long term where you go? And you know, if you can make the most money, and now with the transfer portal, if it's not a good situation in the first year, you can go someplace else for the second year. And even if it's not okay for the third or fourth year, you go someplace else. And that's just the reality of where we are now. You can even stretch it out more so than you used to. It used to be like if you played one play during a season, you would burn a year. Like you couldn't redshirt for that season if you were on the field for one play. Now you can play 4 games. And you got guys doing that. If they don't like the way the season is going, they check out. What's inevitable, and Saban admitted that this yesterday, what's inevitable is that there's going to have to be revenue sharing here. And that's really what's going to determine how much these guys get paid. Because, you know, if you go to a school like Alabama, which brings in a lot of money from not just the big television contract that the SEC has, but also other things, including the tickets and the merchandise and all the other things. Yeah, then you've got a pot of money that the school makes, and they can spend more money to go sign players. You know, the other big schools, Auburn and Georgia and Texas A&M and Texas, those schools, they can do that, and that's the way it's going to work. I like Scott Van Pelt a lot, and I almost always agree with everything he says. I don't think that this view, as he expressed it last night after playing some of the Saban's comments, are really realistic. This was Scott's take on what he heard from Saban.
Naturally, the reaction to Saban's comments on social media was measured. Oh, so you get to care about money and they don't. I get the point, but keep in mind that this man is the all-time winningest coach in the sport in terms of titles, and he's working. He's a professional, so that's why he gets paid all the dough. It's fantastic that players get to make money now, but every single coach in every single revenue sport, if you're paying attention, is saying the same thing. This is the only thing that any recruit is asking about now when they come on visits. And I don't believe that it's pearl clutching to wonder if maybe that's not ideal. Maybe something about the school and your development there as a human being ought to count as part of your process and your line of thinking, because overwhelmingly these athletes are going to have to find a job which isn't football when they leave. Sure, get your money, but there's more to it.
Well, but the problem I see, and I never played varsity athletics at the college level. That's way beyond me, so I don't have any real experience in it other than being around college athletes for 40-some years. But the college experience for an athlete is a lot different than a normal student. And I sent 2 kids to great colleges, Wisconsin and Indiana. They had great experiences there, but their experiences as students are a lot different than the athletes who went to those schools. Wisconsin, big-time football school, basketball too. They've been to the championship game in recent years. Indiana, legendary basketball school. They have, Division I football too. They haven't been very good most of the years, but they have that. And their lives, the lives of the athletes at those schools, are a lot different than what my kids experience. And they're really employees of the school. That's the way you have to look at that. And if they get an education along the way, that's great. I've always thought that when an athlete commits to a school, that he is committed to going and participating in everything that's involved with being an athlete, but you got to give him or her a coupon for an education. And if they don't take advantage of it while they're playing, if they want to just concentrate on getting as good as they can in the sport and getting drafted and having a professional career, so be it. But it will end, it obviously will end, but when it ends, in some cases it's after 1 year, sometimes it's after the case of Tom Brady, 22, 23 years. If they don't have a degree, go back and get it. Now, if you play 23 years, you don't need the coupon. You got enough money to go. But also, especially the way you can attend classes now, everything being done online, you don't even have to be on campus most of the time. So you can get your education and you can prepare yourself for work. But the old idea of, you go to school till 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you hit the practice field and you practice for a couple of hours and then you do everything else that normal students do, it's just not realistic anymore. And especially with basketball, with the travel that they have to do, the amount of time with meetings and so forth. So what Nick Saban is saying and what Scott is saying to a large degree about the development of the person, that's all great, and that can all happen, and they can all get degrees. And Saban even said at one point yesterday that with the transfer portal, you're decreasing each time you transfer your chances of graduation by about 20%. I don't know how he came up with that figure, but that may be accurate. You can't always transfer credits. It doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes you've got decisions being made to leave that school before the semester is over and you don't complete the classwork. There's all those things that go into it. But we're in a time now that is so different than it was 5 years ago. And when it was going on 5 years ago, there was a lot of under-the-table stuff and things that were going on where athletes were getting money. But now it's wide open. It's in the open how much money is involved. And when you're 18, it used to be, hey, you get to go to Alabama. Man, I'm not being recruited by them. Now it's, how much is Alabama paying you? Oh, really? Well, I'm getting X amount of dollars more from Texas A&M. Oh, really? How about that? Well, maybe I should check into that. And maybe I'll go there next year if I don't like it at Alabama. And those are things that are not in sync with the way college athletics have worked. And, it's time to completely overhaul the system. And as Jay Billis said, is what you're going to have to do is you're going to have athletes who sign contracts. And if you want to transfer, there's a buyout in there. And, not crippling buyout, but if you're getting money to go into school there and you want to get out, you're going to have to pay your way out of it. And if somebody wants to bring you into another school, maybe they could make this illegal. We'd see how long that lasts, but maybe make it illegal to a school to pay your buyout for you. So, you don't have teams like poaching players all the time, but it's happening now anyway. And speaking of that, I don't have any information on this. It just seems suspicious to me. And it wouldn't be suspicious if we didn't have this transfer portal where you could go year to year. Julian Reese has played 3 years at Maryland. He's got another year of eligibility. you would think, having been a star at Maryland for 3 years and possibly still developing towards an NBA career, a lot of holes in his game that he has to work on, but he's an excellent rebounder, and he's a pretty good scorer. He's got to work on his free throws and things like that, but could wind up being in the NBA. You'd think he'd come back for another year at Maryland, and maybe he will, but he missed the last regular season game because of what they said was an ankle tweak, yet he was in uniform for the game on Sunday, didn't play, and now he is questionable to play tonight in their opening game against Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament. And, it's probably all legit. He probably is hurt. But you think about the transfer portal, and you wonder in a season where Maryland, could they win 5 games over 5 days? Yes, it's possible, but highly unlikely that's going to happen. They haven't shown any consistency during the season. You're going to win 5 games in 5 nights? I don't think so. And they don't have a lot of depth either. It's not a deep team. So they're going to get worn out even if they win tonight and somehow win the next night. But you just wonder, is this Julian Reese checking out? I have no inside information on this. I'm just speculating. But the reason I'm speculating is because of the way things work in college athletics now. And Julian Reese may not want to jeopardize whatever money he could get to go to some other school, which there may have already been discussions about that. Somebody's already maybe reached out to him and said, hey, Julian, if you transfer here, I know it's only going to be 1 year, but you'll get, X amount more than you're getting at Maryland. And I don't know what he's making at Maryland, but I'm sure it's significant money because he could have transferred last year. And he came back to a team that had, veteran players coming back, including Jameer Young, who was first-team All-Big Ten, Dante Scott, honorable mention, in his 5th year at Maryland. This should have been a better year. And they had a couple of pretty good recruits coming in who haven't panned out the way they hoped. And so he may just say, well, I'm going to take my talents elsewhere. And he's looking at his sister, who won a national championship last year at LSU after transferring from Maryland and may win another one this year. And he realizes he's got no chance to win one this year. And on top of that, she's probably making a lot more money because she's got a bigger profile. She's got supposedly huge deals going on at LSU. And this is the state of things. And, you would hope that a guy would be more and again, he may be legitimately hurt and may want to play. I don't know this. But I'm led to speculation about it because of the state of college athletics, because of the things that Nick Saban says about it and the way we look at it. So call me jaded, call me completely wrong, an idiot, fool, whatever. But I just look at the situation from a wider lens, and that's what I see. That's what I see going on. All right, that's a wrap for me. Tony is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.